Okay, so let's talk about the framework of storytelling. Uh, I'll start my sharing my screen. Now, just before we get started, this is a framework that I have learned from one of my favorite marketers, Bernadette Jiva. It's we actually did a course with I did a course with her known as the Story Skills Workshop, which was put together by Seth Godin and Bernadette Jiva, and where we learned this framework. This is not the only storytelling framework. Of course, there are multiple versions of the framework out there, but this is something that I connected with the most. Also, the other frameworks that you see out there are closely related to this one, so it's not as if one framework is the complete opposite of the other. They're very close and interrelated with each other. One other thing before we go ahead is that storytelling can differ from from context to context. Stories that are told in a movie are perhaps different from a marketing story. So what we are going to take a look at right now is a story framework. It's not typically a business story framework or a marketing story framework. Of course, the marketing story is closely associated with this framework, so with just a few tweaks here and there you can create a marketing story framework. But yeah, just for the sake of this video, it's a story, just a plain story, not any marketing story or a business story. All right. uh, there are three principles of storytelling. One is arousing the interest of the user or of the reader or of the viewer, which means that you have to put in something which generates some kind of a curiosity, which generates some kind of a interest from the user, so getting their attention. Second is showing the struggle. You have to show the struggle because the struggle is where the tension is created. The struggle is when the listener or the viewer actually starts seeing himself as the hero of the story, not consciously but subconsciously. And that is where they really start caring about the hero. And then lastly, there is showing the change, because so after this journey, after this struggle, the worldview of the hero changes, the whole situation changes, so you just show that change to them. That's when all the tension is released, and that is when your story is complete. Now, getting one step deeper into this, arousing the interest has two parts into it: the context and the catalyst. Showing the struggle has again two components in it, which is complication and change. And the last is showing the change, which has one component in it, which is the consequence. So, going back to the previous slide, these are the three elements of storytelling. And then now each element is further divided into subparts: context, catalyst, complication, change, and consequence. So, there are these 5 C's. Okay, there is no need to get too confused about this. It's a very simple framework, and now I'll explain all of these C's and then we'll take examples. The context is the introduction to the hero's world, which is where you establish context, which means that you simply enter, you get a sneak peek into what the hero is all about. You get a you get an idea about what his life in general looks like, so you basically establish some kind of a context. But soon there is some change that happens in the hero's world, which is known as the catalyst. So there is something that happens because of which his normal routine, his normal life is changed, it's challenged. Now, because of this change, because of this catalyst, there's a complication, which is that okay, now the hero is faced with a problem, and in many cases, a choice. He can either run away from the problem or he can embrace the journey. So that is when the complication is introduced after the catalyst happens. The next is change. So obviously in our favorite stories, the hero decides to overcome, or the hero decides to uh, take on this journey. And then there is this big struggle, because the journey that he's taking, the obstacle that he's fighting is very powerful. And so he needs to dig really deeper. He really needs to go through a transformation in order to conquer this obstacle, or in order to overcome this obstacle. That is what the change is all about. And the last is consequence, that the hero's character and the worldview is forever altered. Okay, so let's take an example just to make this clear. Let's take a very popular example: Harry Potter. So what is the context? Well, Harry is living a normal life with his aunt and uncle, who are not treating him well, and they wish that Harry would have never been, they Harry never stayed with them, and so they are not treating him with a lot of respect and love. But then a catalyst happens. Something happens in Harry's life, which is that Hagrid comes to Harry, and he tells Harry that, Harry, you're a wizard. So you're a wizard, Harry Potter. That's the famous line where it all starts changing, where all of Harry's life is turned upside down. But then there is a complication. What is that complication? That there are dark forces at play, and more specifically, there is Lord Voldemort, who is creating problems for Harry Potter, and who is creating problems for the whole for the whole humanity, basically, or all the wizards for that matter. And so there is a complication, and then Harry Potter has to, along with his friends, has to overcome this struggle. And for that he needs to undergo a change, and for that he needs to go through various obstacles. That is the change part. And what is the last part? The last part is the consequence, where finally Harry destroys all the Horcruxes. He destroys Lord Voldemort, and peace is restored. The hero's character and the worldview is totally altered. Okay, let's take another example. Let's take an example of the Hindi movie Lagaan. Now I have to apologize for all my English friends who would not be able to, let's say, relate to this movie. So I will have an English movie as well uh, towards the end of this video. But for now, let me just talk you through a movie known as Lagaan. So Lagaan is a movie about when Britishers were actually ruling India. The context, the hero in this story is Bhuvan, and the context is that he is his village is suffering, and his village has to pay this tax known as Lagan to the Britishers, and there is no rain. There has not been any rain in his village, because of which the farmers are really struggling to grow their crops, and all of them are hoping that the rain comes very very soon. This is the context. So the catalyst so happens that there is a certain change in the hero story, which means that he comes across an incident. He comes face to face with the British, where he is challenged, and he gets into a friction with one of their officers, where they basically decide that this conflict can be resolved in only one way, which is a cricket match. So if the hero decides to take this challenge, which is where the complication is introduced, and the hero has a choice. If the hero decides to take this challenge, for the next 5 years they would not have to pay any taxes. If the heroes win, if the hero's team wins, he'll not have to pay any taxes. If the hero loses, however, there will be triple taxes. Teen guna lagan, so the taxes will be tripled. And then there is the change, because now that the hero has accepted, now that Bhuvan has accepted this, he has to undergo some change. And so he has to build a team, and he has to train, and he has to overcome all the obstacles. And the consequence is that they win the match, because of which the villagers are happy, and the Britishers leave that village, and basically the hero's character and the worldview is altered. Okay, let's take the last example. Let's say Interstellar, a more contemporary example. What is the context? So Cooper is someone who is living a quiet life with his two kids, one son and one daughter, and his wife's dad. They're living together. That is the context of the story, and he's a pilot. Okay, what is the catalyst? Well, accidentally it so happens that there is some kind of a paranormal activity in his daughter's room, because of which he lands up at a set of coordinates, and he ends up at the NASA center, which is the catalyst. Now when he enters that center, he's exposed to a complication. What is that complication? The complication is that the world is has a problem. The earth is dying, and the crops are we are basically losing all the fertility in the soil, because of which no crops are growing, and so we have to find another place to live. And then there is this plan A and plan B, and one plan basically involves not killing everyone, and the other plan involves basically killing everyone. So that's the complication. The hero, of course, decides to embrace a change, and he basically goes on a mission with a lot of other people, a few astronauts, who decide to scavenge planets. And this is where the challenge begins, because scavenging planets is from like traveling from this galaxy to that galaxy, which is crazy. And then there is all sorts of complications, also all sorts of mishaps that happen, accidents that happen, and all of that basically is the change part. and then finally there is a consequence. He realizes that, oh, okay, love is the answer to this, and because of love he's able to communicate his story to his daughter, who then can save the people on the earth. That's the consequence. And then yes, obviously the consequence also includes that the world is saved, and then they move to a new planet and all of those things. So yeah, these are a few examples of how a story is told. I'm sure that the next time you watch a movie, you'll be able to associate, or even a TV series, you'll be able to associate these elements in specific stories. That's it from today. That's it for today from my end. And as always, let me know which is the thing that you connect with, and what's the feedback for me. How can I make these videos and my content better? Thanks.